There is a country where the ground never stops moving. Earthquakes strike over 1,500 times every year. Entire cities have been flattened by war, erased by fire, swallowed by tsunamis, and rebuilt every single time. This is Japan, a nation of 125 million people, built on the Pacific Ring of Fire, where over 100 active volcanoes shape the land beneath every street, every temple, every skyscraper. A country destroyed in 1945 by atomic bombs, then rising from total devastation to become the world's third largest economy in a single generation. This is not a nation that survives despite destruction. This is a nation that understands destruction as the only certainty. Walk through Tokyo at night and see neon towers glowing against the sky. Buildings that did not exist 30 years ago and will not exist 30 years from now. Then walk through Kyoto at dawn and see temples standing exactly as they did 400 years ago, rebuilt dozens of times but never replaced. Japan holds both in the same breath: constant change and permanent tradition. The future layered over the past without erasing it. But the cycles are accelerating. The population is aging faster than any developed nation. Economic growth has stalled for 3 decades, and the next disaster, the one seismologists call inevitable, could be the earthquake that finally overwhelms even Japan's ability to rebuild. The country that mastered rebirth now faces a new kind of destruction, not sudden, not visible, but irreversible. How does a nation survive? By learning to fall and rise better than anyone else. This is Japan, and its story is still being written. Soar above the Japanese islands and see what nature has created. A chain of land sitting right where 4 giant rock pieces meet under the ocean. These rock pieces crash against each other with so much force that the ground shakes over 1,500 times every year. This is the Pacific Ring of Fire, and Japan sits right in the middle of it. Over 100 active volcanoes rise from the land like sleeping monsters. Earthquakes are not rare events here. They happen all the time, like part of daily life. Descend toward the northeastern coast on March 11th, 2011, and watch the Earth break open under the ocean. A size 9.0 earthquake, the strongest in Japan's history, tears the ocean floor apart 80 kilometers from the coast. The power was the same as 600 million atomic bombs going off at once. The land moved 4 meters to the east in just one moment. Then, the ocean pulled back with a sound like the world taking a deep breath. The giant wave came 30 minutes later. Water walls reaching 40 meters high crashed onto the land like moving mountains. Cars, buildings, ships, entire lives got swept away like toys. 18,000 people died or disappeared. At the Fukushima nuclear power plant, the cooling systems broke down, causing dangerous meltdowns that forced 160,000 people to leave their homes. Walk through any Japanese city today and notice how the buildings tell the story of a country shaped by shaky ground. Buildings bend instead of breaking. They sit on special foundations that let structures float above the moving ground. Building rules require every structure to handle massive earthquake power through bendable steel frames and shock absorbers. Warning systems send alerts to millions of phones seconds before shaking starts, giving people time to find safety. Children practice earthquake drills as often as they learn math, because the next big earthquake will definitely come. But here is what most people miss when they see Japan's disaster planning. This shaky geography is not a problem to fix, but the reason Japan became what it is today. The unstable ground forced new ideas. The disasters forced people to work together. Knowing that everything will eventually break created a culture built not on making things last forever, but on the ability to rebuild better than before. Modern Tokyo is safer from earthquakes than any city in history, because it sits on ground that never stops moving. Japan is built on shaky ground. Rebuilding is not a choice, it is how they survive. The land taught Japan that destruction will always happen, but the lesson that changed the whole nation came not from earthquakes, but from war, from damage so complete that the entire country turned to ash, and from choosing to rebuild into something the world had never seen. The ashes of 1945 are about to rise. By August 1945, Japan was destroyed, not damaged, completely destroyed. Enemy bombing attacks had burned over 60 major cities using firebombs that turned wooden neighborhoods into giant fires, eating entire areas in just hours. Then came Hiroshima, August 6, 1945. A single atomic bomb erased the city in one moment, killing around 80,000 people right away and tens of thousands more in the months after. 3 days later, Nagasaki followed. The message was clear. The war was over and Japan had lost everything. Descend toward the ruins of Hiroshima in September 1945 and see what was left. Flat buildings, twisted metal, the broken dome of one building standing alone against the sky as the only thing you could still recognize. The people who survived called themselves Hibakusha, explosion-affected people. They faced radiation sickness, hunger, and the heavy feeling of living in a nation that had been completely broken. Yet within months, they began clearing the broken pieces. Within years, they began rebuilding. Not because they had money or supplies, because they had no other choice but to start again. The American military took control of Japan from 1945 to 1952 under General Douglas MacArthur. They changed the government, wrote a new constitution that said Japan could never have an attacking military again, and started economic changes that helped the country recover. What happened next was called the Japanese economic miracle of the 1950s to 1980s. A war-destroyed nation became the world's second-largest economy through smart government-business teamwork, new technology, making products for other countries, and a work culture that put the whole nation's success first. Walk through any city in 1980s Japan and see the results. Toyota, Sony, Honda, Panasonic, brand names that changed what the world thought about quality products. These companies proved that complete destruction could become the starting point for something totally new and better. By the 1980s, made in Japan meant the best quality you could buy. The same country that had been turned to ash was now teaching the world how to make everything from cars to electronics. But the economic miracle came with a hidden price, a work culture so intense it created a word that exists only in Japanese, karoshi, which means death by working too much. The same hard work and discipline that rebuilt the nation began eating up the people inside it. Workers spent so much time at the office that some never saw their families awake. The system that saved Japan from destruction started destroying something else, the lives of the people who made it work. Japan did not just recover from total destruction, it reinvented itself into something completely new. But the question no one asked was whether the system built to survive disaster could survive peace and success. Japan rebuilt from ashes through discipline, precision, and teamwork. But rebuilding once is not enough when the ground never stops shaking. So Japan did something no other nation has ever tried. It built the ability to rebuild into the system itself. The machine that rebuilds everything is about to show how it works. Soar above Tokyo at rush hour and see the machine in action. Bullet trains pulling into stations with 30-second timing, highways flowing with perfectly organized traffic, construction crews building structures in weeks that would take years anywhere else. This is not chaos, held together by luck. This is a system designed, improved, and maintained with careful attention to every tiny detail. Infrastructure strength, cultural discipline, shared responsibility. Japan did not rebuild randomly after war and earthquakes. It built a society where rebuilding is built into every structure, every schedule, every citizen's understanding of their job. Descend into Tokyo's subway network. 13 lines, 285 stations, moving 8 million people every day, and feel what real precision means when lives depend on it. Trains arrive within seconds of planned times. If a train is 30 seconds early, the conductor makes a public apology over the speakers. Station platforms have exact marks showing where doors will open. Passengers line up in perfect rows before the train even arrives. The system works not because of technology alone, but because every person understands that their cooperation keeps the entire machine running. Efficiency here is not just a business goal. It is how everyone survives together. Walk through any Japanese building and notice the engineering that most people never see. Base isolation systems let structures move separately from the shaking ground during earthquakes, like buildings floating on rubber cushions. Flexible steel frames bend without breaking, designed to sway like trees in strong wind. Tuned mass dampers, giant pendulums inside skyscrapers weighing hundreds of tons, fight against earthquake forces like massive shock absorbers for buildings. The Tokyo Sky Tree, standing 634 meters tall, uses a traditional Japanese pagoda design in its central core because ancient builders knew how to make structures that survive earthquakes for over 1,000 years. Experience the Shinkansen bullet train, running since 1964, which has never had a single passenger die in an accident in over 60 years of operation. No other high-speed train system anywhere in the world can say that. These trains travel at 320 kilometers per hour and arrive so precisely that station clocks are set by their arrival times. The cleaning crews have 7 minutes to completely clean each train car between passengers, turning and flipping every seat, checking every surface, replacing headrest covers. They bow to the train before and after their work, not because they have to, but because perfection is a form of respect. Enter any Japanese home and find government-required earthquake kits with water, food, flashlights, and emergency supplies that every family must have by law. Every neighborhood has disaster coordinators who know exactly where elderly people live, which buildings might collapse first, and where to gather if evacuation is needed. Children practice evacuation drills from the time they can walk, learning to drop under desks, cover their heads, and file out in perfect silence. This is not just being prepared. This is turning the whole country into one giant emergency response team that can activate in seconds. Notice how cleanliness becomes part of the rebuilding system. Public spaces stay spotless, not through armies of cleaners, but because throwing trash on the ground is seen as breaking the social contract that holds everything together. Students clean their own schools every day after classes. Construction sites are surrounded by perfectly clean barriers, and workers wear white hard hats that somehow stay white. Even vending machines, over 5 million of them across the country, work perfectly and are rarely vandalized, because damaging shared infrastructure is damaging everyone's ability to rebuild when needed. But here is what visitors do not see about this perfect system. The same organization that makes rapid recovery possible also creates pressure no human mind was built to handle. The expectation of perfection, the removal of any room for mistakes, the cultural demand that every person works like a perfect part of the machine. Workers stay at the office until their boss leaves, even if there is no work to do. Karoshi, death from overwork, kills thousands every year. Order makes rebuilding possible, but order demands sacrifice. And the cracks in the system are not in the buildings, they are in the people holding them up. The system made Japan the most organized nation on Earth. But efficiency is not magic. It is Tokyo, the city that shows both the system's greatest success and its heaviest pressure, where constant change has become the only thing that stays the same. The city from the future is about to show you what tomorrow costs. Soar above Tokyo and see what 37 million people look like when packed into one giant living organism. A spread of skyscrapers reaching toward the clouds, highways stacked in layers like a giant puzzle, rail lines threading through every neighborhood, and lights that never completely turn off. Shibuya Crossing beats like a heart at the center of this machine. Thousands of people crossing a single intersection every 120 seconds in organized chaos. Neon signs tower above in every direction, taller than most buildings in other countries. Screens flash advertisements in colors that hurt your eyes. Music pours from shop doorways. And somehow, with all these people moving in different directions, no one bumps into each other. This is Tokyo, the city from the future, where constant rebuilding is not a temporary phase. It is permanent. Descend into Akihabara at night and feel your senses get overwhelmed. Floors of electronics stores stacked 7 stories high, arcade games blasting music from fighting and dancing games, vending machines selling everything, from hot coffee to fresh eggs to used comic books, and streets lined with shops selling manga, anime figures, and technology that has not yet reached the rest of the world. The lights are so bright, you can read a book on the street at midnight. Robot restaurants serve food on moving conveyor belts, while holographic fish swim through the air above your table. This is not science fiction. This is Tuesday night in Tokyo. Then walk just 10 minutes to Asakusa and stand before Senso-ji, Tokyo's oldest temple, where incense smoke rises toward a sky filled with modern towers that seem to touch the clouds. The temple was destroyed in World War II bombing. It was rebuilt using the same traditional methods. It has stood for over 1,400 years in different forms on the same spot, and it will stand tomorrow. even as the city around it transforms into something completely different every decade. Walk through any Tokyo neighborhood and notice something strange about the buildings. Most of them look new because they are new. Tokyo's building lifespan averages 26 years, shorter than almost any major city in the world. Structures are torn down and rebuilt rather than fixed up, driven by earthquake safety rules, tax benefits for new construction, and a cultural acceptance that buildings are temporary like everything else. Entire city blocks disappear and reappear with different shapes, different purposes, different stories. The technological density is unmatched anywhere on Earth. Automated convenience stores where you never see a human worker. Robot-staffed hotels where machines check you in and carry your luggage. Facial recognition payment systems that know who you are before you reach for your wallet. And 5 million vending machines across Japan, roughly one for every 25 people. Experience Tokyo's pop culture industries that have changed how the world thinks about entertainment. Anime, manga, video games, fashion, generating billions in global money while creating visual and story trends that influence movies, music, and art worldwide. In Harajuku, teenagers dress in costumes that look like they stepped out of fantasy movies. In Shinjuku, businessmen in perfect suits walk past giant screens showing cartoons and robot battles. Pokémon was born here. Super Mario was born here. The visual language of the internet was largely written in Tokyo's creative districts. But Tokyo's constant change hides a question no one asks out loud. If nothing is built to last, what happens to memory? What happens to the stories that live in places when those places disappear every generation? Families lose the houses where their grandparents lived because the buildings get torn down for earthquake safety. Neighborhoods lose their character when every structure gets replaced. Tokyo represents endless transformation. But transformation always erases something in the process of becoming something new. The city gains the future by constantly losing its past. Tokyo showed the future built on constant change, but Japan never replaced the past completely. It simply built over it, layering modernity on top of tradition so carefully that both exist at the same time without fighting each other. The temples that never disappeared are about to reveal what survives beneath all the change. Soar south from Tokyo's neon chaos toward Kyoto, the ancient capital, home to over 1,600 Buddhist temples and 400 Shinto shrines, where time flows differently than anywhere else in modern Japan. This city was deliberately spared from atomic bombing during World War II because American leaders recognized that destroying Kyoto would mean erasing over 1,000 years of cultural and spiritual heritage that defines Japanese identity. Walk through the gates of Fushimi Inari and see thousands of vermilion torii tunnels climbing the mountain like a red river flowing upward, each gate donated by families, businesses, and pilgrims across centuries. Their prayers and wishes are written in black ink on the wooden posts, creating a mountain covered in hopes that stretch back generations. Walk through the Zen garden at Ryo-en-ji, where 15 stones sit in raked gravel arranged so perfectly that only 14 are visible from any single viewing angle. A meditation on the impossibility of seeing everything at once, designed 500 years ago and raked fresh every morning by monks who wake at dawn to create the same perfect patterns their teachers taught them decades earlier. The past did not disappear in Japan. It was preserved beneath layers of modernity, still practiced, still honored, still alive in ways that tourists see but locals live. Descend into a tea house in Gyeon at dawn and watch the ritual unfold with movements as precise as surgery. Water heated over charcoal until it reaches exactly the right temperature. Matcha whisked in precise strokes that take years to master, the cup presented with both hands in a gesture unchanged for centuries. The tea ceremony is not about tea. It is about presence, about slowing time to a crawl, about performing an action so deliberately that the action itself becomes meditation. In a country obsessed with speed and efficiency, the tea ceremony is the complete opposite, a ritual designed to waste time beautifully, to prove that some things should never be rushed. Experience what happens in April when cherry blossoms bloom across Kyoto and the entire city pauses. Hanami, flower viewing, is not tourism or vacation. It is national philosophy made visible through pink and white petals. The blossoms last only days, sometimes only hours if rain or wind arrives. Their beauty is inseparable from their impermanence. And the Japanese gather beneath them, not to celebrate things that last forever, but to honor the fleeting, the temporary, the beautiful moments that disappear even as you watch them. Families spread blankets under the trees, eat simple food, and sit in silence as petals fall like snow. Children try to catch them. Adults take photos that can never capture what they felt. Notice how Shinto and Buddhism exist together throughout Japan without fighting or contradiction. Shinto rituals mark life beginnings and celebrations like births and marriages, while Buddhist ceremonies address death and honoring ancestors, creating a layered spiritual framework woven into daily life like threads in fabric. Most Japanese practice both religions simultaneously without seeing any conflict. Seasonal festivals structure the entire Japanese calendar around natural cycles and ancestral traditions maintained for over 1,000 years. Cherry blossom viewing in spring, moon viewing in autumn, New Year temple visits where millions of people pray for good fortune in the coming year. But here is what reveals Japan's deepest understanding of preservation. Even Kyoto's most sacred sites are not meant to last forever. The Ise-Grand Shrine, one of Japan's holiest places, is completely dismantled and rebuilt every 20 years in a ritual that has continued for over 1,300 years. The old shrine is taken apart piece by piece. New wood is cut using traditional tools. Young carpenters learn ancient techniques from masters. The new shrine rises in exactly the same design as the old one. The old materials are distributed to other shrines across Japan. This proves that preservation in Japan does not mean freezing the past like a museum, but continually renewing it, keeping it alive through constant practice rather than just protection. Walk through any Kyoto street and notice how modernity and tradition layer over each other without erasing anything. A convenience store next to a 400-year-old temple, salary workers in business suits buying offerings for evening prayers, geishas checking smartphones between traditional performances. Japan does not replace the past. It layers the future over it carefully, like archaeological deposits. Both remain visible if you know where to look. The temples showed a past that refuses to die, traditions that survive by changing just enough to stay alive. But beneath the discipline, beneath the efficiency, beneath the beautiful rituals that tourists admire, pressure builds like water behind a dam. And the cost of maintaining perfection is written not in buildings or ceremonies, but in the people who hold the system together. The human price of rebuilding is about to surface. Descend into a Tokyo office building at 9 p.m. and see what the economic miracle actually costs. Rows of employees still at their desks with screens glowing in dim light, coffee cups stacked beside keyboards like small towers, and a cultural expectation so powerful it has a name: Ganbaru, to keep going, to endure, to never give up, no matter the personal cost. Walk through the fluorescent-lit hallways and feel the weight of silence, broken only by the sound of keyboards clicking and air conditioning humming. This is the same discipline that rebuilt Japan from ashes, the same collective responsibility that makes trains run perfectly on time, the same cultural pressure that turned a defeated nation into an economic superpower. But discipline applied without limits does not create strength. It creates collapse from the inside. Pull closer and see what happens when perfection becomes the only acceptable standard. Karoshi, death by overwork, claims lives every year through heart attacks, strokes, and suicides, tied directly to complete exhaustion. The government officially recognizes it as a real cause of death. Families take companies to court over it. Workers die at their desks, and nobody finds them until the next morning. Yet the culture that creates this tragedy remains mostly unchanged, because changing it feels like giving up the discipline that made Japan successful. Young salary workers called salarymen work 60 to 80 hours per week, sleep 4 hours per night, and see their families only on weekends if they are lucky. Enter the hidden world of the hikikomori, an estimated 1.5 million people, mostly young men, who have completely withdrawn from society, living in their childhood bedrooms for months or years, unable or unwilling to face the social pressure waiting outside their doors. They order food online, communicate only through video games, and avoid human contact because the expectations feel too heavy to carry. Their families feed them through their bedroom doors and pretend to neighbors that everything is normal. Loneliness has become epidemic across all ages. Birth rates have collapsed to 1.26 children per woman, far below the 2.1 needed to keep the population stable. As young Japanese choose not to marry, not to have children, not to participate in a system that demands everything and forgives nothing. Walk through Shibuya at rush hour and notice something missing: genuine smiles. People wear masks, not just for health, but to hide their faces, to avoid eye contact, to create barriers between themselves and a world that expects constant performance. Dating has become so stressful that many young people give up entirely. Marriage requires meeting family expectations, financial stability, and social approval that feel impossible to achieve. Having children means committing to raise them in the same pressure system that is breaking their parents. So they choose none of it, and Japan slowly disappears, one unconceived child at a time. Experience the silent pressure that follows every Japanese person from childhood. The expectation to never cause trouble for others, to always meet group standards, to sacrifice personal desires for social harmony. Students study until they collapse, preparing for university entrance exams that determine their entire future. Workers stay late not because they have more work, but because leaving before your boss leaves means you are not committed enough. Mothers are expected to be perfect wives, perfect parents, perfect daughters-in-law, while also often working full-time jobs. The pressure comes not from cruel laws, but from social expectations, so deep they feel like gravity, invisible but always pulling. Visit Japan's rural areas and see entire towns emptying as young people flee to cities, leaving behind aging populations with no one to care for them and no children to inherit family businesses that have run for generations. Elderly people die alone in apartments and are not discovered for weeks. Convenience stores install special shelves low enough for elderly customers who can barely reach normal heights. The population is aging so fast that adult diapers now outsell baby diapers, and schools are closing while nursing homes cannot be built fast enough. But here is what outsiders miss about Japan's pressure. It is not cruelty imposed by evil leaders. It is the same discipline that enabled survival after defeat, the same collective responsibility that rebuilt destroyed cities, the same cultural expectations that made trains run on time and buildings survive earthquakes. Japan's greatest strength and its deepest wound come from exactly the same source. The system that saved the country is now slowly consuming the people who built it. Rebuilding and perfection come at a human cost that no economic measurement captures, and the bill is finally coming due. The pressure revealed cracks in the people holding the system together, but the system itself faces tests it was specifically designed to handle: disasters that arrive without warning, destroy without mercy, and force the entire nation to prove once again that it knows how to rise from complete collapse. The ground is about to break open again. Soar over rural Japan and see what the future looks like when it empties. Abandoned rice fields, stretching like green scars across mountainsides where no one harvests anymore. Shuttered schools with playground equipment rusting in empty courtyards. Villages where the youngest resident is 65 years old and the population shrinks every year like water slowly draining from a bathtub. Japan's population peaked in 2008 at 128 million people. By 2050, experts predict it will fall below 100 million. By 2100, some estimates suggest it could drop to just 50 million, less than half of what exists today. Over 28% of the population is already over 65, making Japan the most rapidly aging society in human history. The birth rate is 1.26 children per woman, far below the 2.1 needed to keep the population stable. The next challenge facing Japan is not sudden destruction from earthquakes or wars. It is slow decline that happens so gradually you cannot see it happening until entire regions have already disappeared. Descend into an abandoned village in the Japanese Alps called Nagoro and see what demographic collapse looks like in physical form. Homes with family belongings still sitting on kitchen tables, left behind when the last residents moved to cities or died with no children to inherit their houses. Elementary schools with tiny desks still arranged in neat rows. Dusty blackboards with lessons half finished. Playgrounds where swings move in mountain wind with no children to push them. Shops with shelves still stocked with canned goods and household items, their elderly owners having simply closed the doors one day and never returned. Entire communities dissolving not from natural disaster, but from the simple fact that no young people remain to continue the cycle of life that sustained these places for centuries. Walk through akiya, the Japanese term for abandoned houses, which now number over 8 million across the country, roughly 13% of all housing stock. Local governments offer these houses for free to anyone willing to move to rural areas, but few people accept because there are no jobs, no schools for children, and no future that young families can imagine building in places where everyone else is leaving. Rice farmers in their 80s work fields their grandfathers planted, knowing that when they die, the land will return to forest because no one learned the traditional knowledge needed to continue farming. Traditional crafts disappear as master artisans die without apprentices, taking centuries of accumulated skill to their graves. Experience the economic stagnation known as Japan's lost decades, a period of minimal growth that began with the asset bubble collapse in the 1990s and continues today. GDP growth has averaged under 1% annually for over 30 years, while other major economies expanded dramatically. Deflation, falling prices, became a chronic condition that discourages spending and investment because consumers expect things to cost less tomorrow, creating a cycle where businesses struggle and wages stagnate. Young people cannot afford to buy homes, start families, or take economic risks, contributing to the declining birth rates that worsen demographic problems. Visit factories across Japan and see how the country addresses labor shortages through the most advanced automation on Earth. Robots perform assembly line work that once employed thousands of humans. AI systems manage inventory, logistics, and quality control with precision that exceeds human capability. Elderly care facilities use robot companions to provide conversation and assistance for aging residents because there are not enough human workers to care for the growing elderly population. Automated convenience stores operate 24/7 with minimal human staff, serving customers through facial recognition and digital payment systems that eliminate the need for cashiers. But Japan remains one of the least immigrant-friendly developed nations, despite desperate economic need for workers. Cultural resistance to immigration means that Japan chooses technological solutions over human solutions, building a society where machines fill roles that other countries address through bringing in foreign workers. Language barriers, complex visa requirements, and social expectations for cultural conformity discourage immigration even when jobs are available and companies need workers. Understand how Japan's response to demographic decline mirrors its response to every other crisis in its history, not through resistance or denial, but through adaptation to new realities. Robotics companies like Honda, Toyota, and SoftBank lead global development of humanoid robots designed to replace human labor. Smart cities incorporate AI into urban planning, traffic management, and public services. Automated farming systems use drones, sensors, and AI to manage crops with minimal human involvement. Japan is not trying to solve demographic decline by reversing it. It is engineering a society that functions with fewer people, older people, and more machines. The slow decline revealed a challenge that rebuilding cannot solve. You cannot rebuild a population. You cannot engineer birth rates the way you engineer earthquake-resistant buildings. Japan's cultural discipline, the same trait that enabled recovery from war and disaster, has not produced a solution to people simply choosing not to have children. But as we rise above the archipelago one final time, pulling back from empty villages and aging cities, one truth emerges that defines everything Japan has ever been and everything it will become. The answer is not in the buildings or the technology. It is in the philosophy that makes rebuilding possible, even when rebuilding seems impossible. Rise above Japan one final time and see the entire archipelago stretched beneath like a living map of survival. The volcanic peaks still breathing steam into clear skies, the coastal cities rebuilt from tsunami scars, the ancient rice terraces carved into mountainsides by hands that have been dust for centuries, the neon towers of Tokyo glowing against traditional temples that have stood and fallen and risen again for over 1,000 years. See the forests slowly reclaiming abandoned villages, the bullet trains threading between mountains that could shake them off the tracks at any moment, the fishing boats returning to harbors that have been destroyed and rebuilt more times than anyone can count. This is a country that has been destroyed and rebuilt more times than almost any other place on Earth. By earthquakes that split the ground open, by tsunamis that erased entire coastlines, by war that turned cities to ash, by economic collapse that shattered confidence for decades, by demographic decline that empties entire regions, and every single time it rose again, not identical to what came before, but continuous, like a river that changes course but never stops flowing. Descend one last time into the heart of a nation shaped by cycles rather than straight lines, where cherry blossoms bloom in magnificent pink clouds and fall within days, where shrines are deliberately dismantled and rebuilt every 20 years by craftsmen whose grandfathers performed the same ritual, where entire city blocks are demolished and reconstructed every generation, not because they are broken, but because rebuilding is what keeps things alive, where the ground moves constantly and buildings sway like trees but do not break because they were designed to dance with destruction rather than resist it. Walk through any Japanese street and feel how layers of time exist simultaneously. Ancient wooden temples next to glass skyscrapers, traditional festivals celebrated with smartphone cameras, elderly people in kimono boarding trains that float on magnetic rails, convenience stores selling 400-year-old snacks next to robots that make fresh coffee. Japan should not exist, a chain of islands sitting on the Pacific Ring of Fire, shaken by 1,500 earthquakes every year, flattened by war, devastated by tsunamis, facing demographic collapse, and still standing, still working, still rebuilding. The bullet trains still run perfectly on time. The temples still stand on their foundations. The cherry blossoms still bloom every spring for just a few precious days. And every morning, the country wakes to the certainty that the ground will move again, and the discipline to continue anyway. This is not a nation that survives despite instability. This is a nation that was built by it. You now understand what Japan actually is. Not a country of permanence, but a country of cycles. Not a culture of resistance, but a culture of adaptation. Not a system that never breaks, but a system designed to rebuild better than before. The lesson is not about Japan alone. It is about what Japan reveals, that survival is not avoiding collapse, but learning to rise from it. That identity is not what stays the same, but what continues through change, and that the most resilient structures are not the ones that never break, but the ones designed to be rebuilt. If Japan's story changed how you see resilience and the cost of rebuilding, share this with someone who needs to see what survival actually looks like. Subscribe for more journeys into places where destruction and beauty exist together. What struck you most? The philosophy of wabi-sabi, the shrine rebuilt every 20 years, or the tsunami survivors who returned to rebuild? Drop your answer in the comments. And tell me honestly, if everything you built would eventually be destroyed, would you still build it? Let's discuss. because Japan's question belongs to all of us.